Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Taylor. Welcome to another installment of MSP Webinars. Today, I'm joined by Glenn from Uplevel Systems. And, they have a really neat little device that we're able to offer as hardware as a service. Glenn, your device, it's a router, firewall, Wi-Fi access point, file server. I mean, this thing, I feel like it does everything under the sun. Is that right?
Well, it doesn't do everything under the sun, but it's certainly meant to be. It's certainly meant to cover the core IT technologies that a smaller business would need, like an under 25 person. So yeah, it does quite a few functions, networking as well as offering some of the file server services as well.
Now, I feel like, if this thing's doing all these things, is this like the jack of all trades, master of none? I feel like, there are some companies out there that have some really fantastic router firewalls, but that's really all it does. Like, you got to go out and get your Wi-Fi access point separately on some of these systems, let alone a file server and everything else. So can you talk to me about that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. So I think the reaction a lot of people have when they see the system, if they're established MSPs, is wow, I could actually do this. I could go get some Sonic Wall or Sophos, and I could get some Ubiquity and some Synology, and hey, I could put this all together myself. And that's certainly true. All of these functions are out there. But what we really focus on is trying to make it easy for your tier one techs to actually deploy what most businesses need. So sometimes you do need that advanced functionality, obviously, and that's where our competitors' products fit. But a lot of times you just need something basic, reliable that your tier one techs can support. So if you got an 8-10 person company, you can deploy some standardized hardware and have your lower cost techs be able to support them so you can make money as a business. And that's really where we focus our efforts.
Excellent. So I know that you've got some additional information prepared for us. I feel like, now's a good time for you to go through that. For those of you that are watching live, feel free to pop some questions into the Q&A section of Zoom. If you're watching this later on YouTube, feel free to pop some questions into the comments section, and I can always forward those questions over to Glenn and, get you some answers. Take it away, Glenn.
All right. Thanks a lot, Steve. So let me just share my screen here, everyone. All right. So also on the phone with me today is Tom. So Tom actually is founder of the company. He's done a number of different startups, this being his fourth. One of the more interesting ones is he actually did one of the first Ethernet switching chips. So he's got a lot of background. We're very much a startup. We've been growing, by the way, at about 15% month on month. So we are on our way, but we are still very much in startup mode. So I'm going to go through a few things with you here. First, I'm going to show you what we're seeing in our data, and then just get onto the product, and then get into a product demo, and then we'll come back and cover what the partner program is, and some questions with Steve. So the first question we always get asked is why now? And the why now is really micro SMBs, which are companies we that have under 25 employees. They've really, in the last 5 years, adopted all sorts of technology. So you guys know this. There's VoIP everywhere. They've got their own line of business servers. People want to work from home, or they have multiple sites they need to connect it together. Security, worried about employees taking things away, as well as being able to keep hackers out and ransomware out and all these sorts of things. So these are, pretty critical issues for all of these businesses. And to that point, one of the things that we found earlier on when we were talking to partners, we said, we'd really love to put some numbers on this. Well, one of our investors happens to be an accountant. And so they kept track of what their lost billable hours were. It turned out to be $40,000 a year for a 15-person company, just in 15 and 30-minute increments. So there's a pretty substantial revenue opportunity there, but clearly the businesses are dependent on these services. And then, of course, it just became too complex for people to manage. You can't just rely on somebody working part-time. They need to know too much to be able to do it well, but can't afford a full timer, and that's why we're all in on managed services. And of course, the challenge for you guys is that you need to have a way to make it affordable for them, both from the equipment side as well as from the ongoing OpEx side. So I want to share with you a few things. You can read through this slide. We're not going to go through every bullet point. But a few things that we're seeing when we start to engage in the market. And that first one is really a big one. We see a lot of environments where we go into where the network is just grossly mismatched in terms of size and manageability and so forth. So that 5-port Netgear switch, this is maybe the most egregious example, but we see that over and over and over again. And then the other things like VoIP, right? So people love VoIP. They love to roll out these phones. They're great. You can get them. They have the cloud server, but then they sound really bad because they don't have the QoS capabilities. And again, you guys know how to handle this, but the issue being that you've got to get the right infrastructure in place to get people over that hump. And so that's really what we're working to do, is to give you as much control over that infrastructure as possible while keeping it simple, and then give you visibility into things like the ISPs changing their configurations, so you know what's going on. So Steve had asked me to pull together a little bit of data, so I thought you guys might actually find this a little interesting. So this is some data from our customer base. Now, again, bear in mind we're the under 25 market, so what you see in the data is that there's sort of an echo, if you will, right around the 40 device point. And so even though in theory everyone should be operating in that under 25 space, a lot of people are not. You'll also note the clump way out at 300 devices. It stops at 300 or peaks up there just because that's where we stop counting any further clients. So a lot of those accounts will have more than 300. So some of these clients are just guest devices, and in fact, all those out at 300, those are things like title companies, you know, for real estate transactions, or they're an arena, an office and a hockey arena, that kind of thing. Places you expect to have lots of guest access. But the interesting part is the tail between 50 and 200. So those are normal companies, so to speak, with 25 to 35 employees, and clearly there's way more than one device per employee. So even in these smaller companies, you've got IoT kind of things like just barcode scanners and printers and all that kind of stuff. And you've got people bringing in devices, so way more than one device per employee. And you couple that with what you see on the right. So these are some stats. This is just port-based blocking out of our device. So we just kind of track this. So this came over 48 hours from one of our partners in Florida at a site, and you can see that they're actively being pinged on the services. You would expect that they're actively being pinged on, people trying to find vulnerabilities. So you couple these two things together with a lot of unmanaged devices, a lot of security issues, and you can use this data to kind of show customers, hey, this is what's going on at your site. So there you go, some representative data from a small business customer. So what does Uplevel do? So we make Unbox, and Unbox is a solution, as I was saying in the beginning with Steve, that's really focused on simplicity. So we'll go through all the functions that it has in a moment, but the goal is to make it really so that your tier 1 techs can reasonably install and manage the solution, so that it fits into a smaller environment without a lot of headache or integration or support from your senior techs. Then the other thing we did, we made it 100% subscription. So even though it's hardware as a service. It also includes a cloud component. Obviously, it's cloud managed, and it's all in. So it includes, we'll get to this in a second, but it includes the hardware, the support, the warranty, really everything. In fact, there's even every 3 years you get you're eligible for a hardware upgrade to your customer accounts as part of the ongoing service. And then finally, our goal is just to keep things as reliable as possible. Tom and I and our third co-founder, we all came out of the test and measurement environment. So we made equipment that Cisco would use to test their Internet Core routers, or Juniper. Wi-Fi access points is where Tom and I met, really large Wi-Fi systems. And we recognize the only way to make money in this market is to keep things nice and reliable. So we have a huge focus on reliability, and then we're focused on supporting problems afterwards. So this is really what's different about our solution. to give you an idea of where it's used, it's a pretty good cross section of different market verticals. We do particularly well with multi-site companies, property management, insurance companies, those sorts of things. Our site-to-site VPN is really, really simple to set up. And it's obviously businesses where IT is critical to their operation. All of our customers are supported via MSPs, so we do not sell direct at all. We don't think that's good for the customer. We don't think it's good for our business. So you guys never have to worry about us going around you, so to speak, to try and sell directly to a customer. Okay, so now to just dive right into what the product does, and you'll see this in the product demo. So we've got a series of functions, and this is what Steve was referring to when he said jack of all trades, master of none, right? So you can go around the wheel. I'm not going to read them to you, but the important thing to realize is that we work on replacing servers. And today, it's just the file server, but we have ambitions to go a bit further than that, as well as all of the network functionality. And so one of the things that's really nice about our solution, the way it's managed, is sorry, let me stop a little bit here. Let me wind back. So a little bit about the hardware, because this question comes up a lot. So the system itself is based on a Cavium network processor. So a few people have made a run at this market in the past. One of the things that we're doing different, given our background, we actually knew who made a lot of the firewall devices. And so we've gone and secured our hardware from a firewall manufacturer. So this is a multi-core Cavium. It's a network processor, obviously built for performance. The hardware itself also it comes with an option either for no hard drive included if you don't want a file server at all, or you can have a 1 terabyte or a 5 terabyte server. I'm sure I'll get some questions on that in a bit, so I'll kind of leave it at that. Then if you want to increase the scale, you can add PoE switches or access points as needed. And there's a couple of other services that I kind of want to talk about here that aren't reflected. One is we have redundant WAN now since this came out, so you can have a second WAN interface, so you can do failover, and we have load balancing coming between those two links next month. And then with our dynamic DNS, with the DNS filtering, you can use. We integrate DNS filtering into our solution, but you can also use third-party solutions. So if you like Cisco Umbrella, you can use Cisco Umbrella with our solution. If you like WebRoot or WebTitan, you can use those solutions. The advantage of using ours, we happen to use WebTitan as a rule engine, so we didn't make up our own. We just packaged somebody else's. We just give you better pricing, and it's a little easier to manage because it's all integrated. And you can fold all of this into a PSA. So the notifications that come out, just like other email notification systems, you can feed them right into the PSA. Now, the other thing I did want to highlight here is one of the really nice things about our solution is we've, with the latest release, more or less eliminated the need to have static IPs in the WAN. So the way our system works, when you set up firewall rules, when you set up inbound VPNs, you actually don't need to set them up to the IP address on the device. You actually set it up to an IP address in the cloud, and then we can tunnel everything down to where it needs to go on site. And so that can save, again, these smaller customers quite a bit of money. Any questions or anything, Steve, at this point?
Not at this time.
Okay. So what's it cost? So this is where the system, all this functionality is great, but what does it cost? So the base system, which is a 700 megabit stateful firewall, it'll have the site-to-site VPN, obviously, all the management. It's got 8 ports of Ethernet it's managed Ethernet, so they can all go into different groups, different VLANs, IP subnet. That starts at $35 a month. And depending on all the different services you add on, that could get up to $150 to $200 a month, just depending on what subscription term we have. You can go month to month or up to 3 years, and what option you choose. So a typical deployment then is about $75. A typical deployment will have the firewall. It'll have a file server in it. It will have some Wi-Fi and some number of advanced features, maybe the remote access VPN or the advanced firewall with the IPS IDS. But a typical configuration is about $75 per month. And then you guys, set the pricing accordingly. We do have a special promotion through MSP webinars. So we normally would have, if you just came to us directly, we would have a month-to-month, we'd have a 12-month and 36-month pricing that goes with commitment. So in this particular case, you guys will be able to commit to 12 months, but receive the 36-month pricing. So that's about a 15% cost savings to you guys. All right. And the other thing about our pricing is, again, there's nothing up front. So this is pretty nice as you guys start getting on customers onto managed services. If you need to bring in equipment, which you want to get them onto the standard infrastructure, of course, having them buy that equipment a lot of times, particularly with the smaller companies, is a barrier to adoption. You can go out and structure a bunch of leases, of course, around other gear, but with our solution, you just kind of get that. It's always billed monthly. So whether you're on a 12-month commitment, a month-to-month commitment, or a 36-month commitment, you just get billed once a month, and there's nothing that you have to pay up front. There's no additional adders. There isn't anything else that you need to worry about. You call us for support, you've got support. We do the updates, we do the firewall updates nightly, we do the firmware updates, we coordinate with you guys, but you don't have to spend tech time doing the firmware updates. We handle all that for you.
So one of the issues that I had with another, let's call it, small firewall company is, these things, we pretty much have to rely on them. If the device isn't working, we've got an entire building that doesn't have the internet. So what kind of availability do you guys have for support?
So Tom, do you want to take that one on? Tom?
Sure. I was just unmuting myself. Sorry for that.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, let's see. We have a number of things that are designed for our MSP partners to especially address this question. First of all, yes, we have support. They have direct lines into our support people, and we answer support calls pretty much at all hours of the day and night. I personally, for example, done support at 2 a.m. in the morning, believe it or not. But the most important thing is that most of our partners actually would prefer that they didn't have to call a support line. They would just need to drive out to the site, put in a new box, and then get it going. And this actually is probably one of the most fundamental things. And what we do that is, as part of our partner program, we make sure that all of our partners have spare gear on hand, free of charge, so that when something happens, they can actually simply drive out. All it costs them is the time taken to drive out to the customer side, drop, and then you put back the old gear and send it to us. You don't actually have to go through an RMA process, wait for the gear to show up, all that kind of stuff. Your customer would be down for days if you try to do that. And also we have proactive monitoring on all of our systems. Sometimes we even know when a gateway or a firewall is down before our partners do, and we actually proactively reach out and say, hey, your gateway is down. Do you know is your customer having any problems? And that has been well appreciated by all of our partners. Does this answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, actually, I was expecting, 24/7. I wasn't expecting the fact that you're giving us spare devices to keep on hand at no extra charge to us for in the event of an emergency. So that's pretty cool. Aaron, I see you asked if they have replacement options. I feel like the spare on hand kind of answers that question, don't you? Do you guys integrate with any PSA or RMM solutions?
Good question. We do not directly integrate, like we haven't done any native integrations with any PSA or RMM tools. What does happen from our devices is we self-manage. So you'll see if people disconnect APs, if the internet connection goes down, that kind of thing. We'll generate emails, and then obviously you can feed those emails into your PSA. And that's what Tom was alluding to before. And in a lot of cases, what we're finding is our MSPs really are calling customers before customers realize there's even an issue. And in some cases, they're even fixing it and just advising the customer afterwards. So that's gone well.
Nice.
But we have not done any native integrations where you could order our product, out of one of those tools or configure it, that sort of stuff.
I should add a bit of color to that, though. Our partners are, in fact, using our equipment along with their Kaseya or Continuum or ConnectWise or Autotask PSAs. So they do not actually look to our dashboard to get the support tickets. They get the support tickets for a device on their own native PSAs.
Got it. And Tom, just so you know, I'm not sure if it's because you're like really close to the microphone or if the gain is turned up too high, but the audio quality coming from you is not that good.
Oh, sorry, too bad.
So much better. So much better. Okay. All right. So we talked about the PSA. What about configuration restore at replacement? And what about the restoration of the data on the file server side of this device?
Yeah, great question. So that'll become a little more apparent in the demo, but all of the configuration is kept out in the cloud. So, if there's ever a failure or, we've had devices get a lightning strike on the cable modem. It comes through the cable modem and blows out the data port. You take your spare device, you tell us, hey, I'm taking the spare device over. We switch it over to that account, and you plug it in and it pulls its config down from the cloud, and off you go. Now the data, you still need to transfer the data over locally. The device will still function. You just need to copy it over locally.
Okay. What if the hard drive fails?
So we have two different kinds of backup. We have local backup, which are done via snapshots, and then we have cloud backup, which is really disaster recovery, which is what you're talking about. Okay. So one of the things where we talk about no hidden costs with our system, our system runs out of AWS. It's a real data center. It's not a server in Tom's closet or in my closet. But you don't really need to pay anything else to anyone else. You just basically turn on our cloud backup. We will store it out there. And then if you ever have equipment fail, if you have a sufficient connection, you can restore it locally to your device. If you don't have a sufficient internet connection, you can let us know. We have a gigabit connection, so we can pull down the data and overnight a system to you.
Basically, Steve, this goes along with the spare device concept. So if your gateway goes out, this hardware as a service, if your gateway goes out, it's on us. We will load up a gateway with your data and ship it to you overnight.
All right. Any other questions?
Just a couple more real quick. Is this thing a full-blown UTM, or is it more or less just a firewall?
Yeah, it's closer to a firewall than a UTM at this point. It is not a full-blown UTM. We don't have things like gateway antivirus on this device. However, we do have a fair bit of functionality. So we have port blocking firewall, just reject people based off IP address and port. We also have an IPS IDS. So we use Nord as a rule engine there. So we have inspection based. We also have DNS filtering, as we talked about. We're coming with geo blocking. So we just keep adding more and more security features. But I would say at this point, I would characterize this more as a solid firewall and less as a UTM.
Excellent. And you said that this on average is like $75 a month, our cost. Mm-hmm. What do you suggest we sell this to our clients for the people that are doing this as a line item kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. So it varies a lot. I guess I probably don't need to tell any of you that what you're going to sell this for in San Francisco is going to be a lot different from what you're going to sell it for here in Dallas, which is where I'm based. Having said that, to answer the question directly, most people are using a 1.5x to a 2x. So, $125 to $150 a month for this particular line item.
Okay.
So the way that looks for most people rolling it out, just to give you a picture, is instead of saying, hey, look, you want to come to managed services, I can really help you guys out. And you give them all the benefits of aligning your interests long-term and all that. And then you get to the money part. And instead of saying, hey, look, I need $3,000 or $4,000 from you in order to get that, 4-port Netgear out of the way and to get a proper file server in place and so on, so that then I can get you on managed services for $500 a month. You just come along and say, hey, look, it'll be $700 a month, and you'll get a whole new infrastructure that's managed along with that. So, I like to think about it like it sort of unsticks the sales process. And when we get into the positioning, sometimes that works really well. There's other people who want to own the hardware, and there we're really not a great fit. When people really and truly want to own the hardware, then that would be a place where we wouldn't fit.
Okay. And the hardware. Okay, so are you guys developing the hardware? Is it, are you doing what some of these other companies are doing where they're just, going out and buying a MikroTik or TrendNet or whatever and slapping your own sticker on it? Are you white labeling it? What are you?
I'm going to let Tom. Yeah, I'm going to let the guy who built it answer that question because he'll give you the best answer. It's a good question.
Yes, indeed. So let's see. The hardware divides up into two pieces. The critical piece, the core piece, is the gateway/firewall. We had that basically built for us by a manufacturer in Santa Clara. So essentially, it's a Cavium-based 4-core processor, as Len said. It's the same kind of Cavium that you see on Cisco router blades, and the manufacturer builds it for us to our reliability requirements, and we ship that. All of the software that runs on that gateway is, however, developed completely by us in-house. In terms of the switches and access points, these are actually much more commodity items, though, of course, there's a huge difference in quality that you find for different vendors, the switches and access points. So we, using our test equipment, enterprise class background, we went out and tested a bunch of different pieces of hardware, found hardware that worked, and then proceeded to strip the software because in our experience, it's the firmware and software riding on these access points that really screws them up. We take all the software off, we put our own custom software on it, and provide that to our partners.
And the people writing the code, are those people outsourced or employees?
No, and there's no outsourced code at all. It's all employees, 100%.
And where are those employees located?
They're right here in the office with me in Portland. It's a small team, but it's a very highly skilled one.
So Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine.
I'm sorry, Portland, Oregon.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. There are a couple of other questions. I'm going to let those questions wait until after we do a little demo. I think the demo will answer some of those.
Okay, that sounds great. So let me just jump right into the demo here then. And Steve, you can still see my screen, correct?
Yes, I see
Okay.
you logging into portal.uplevelsystems.com.
Sweet. Okay, cool. Now, if you guys go to our website, we actually have a demo on our website that you can walk through if you want to check it out. The reason I mention that is because, as Tom said earlier, normally all of the issues that we identify can get pushed to your PSA. So normally people don't come back and look at this dashboard unless they're driven to come look to the dashboard because they've gotten a notification elsewhere. And one of the things we did, knowing that we wanted to go to MSPs, is we built the dashboard really around MSPs. So we wanted to show all of the customers, and then if you can click on any of them, you'll see the status. You'll see all the sites and all the services running across the customer. So on the demo dashboard, you'll actually see what the screen looks like when we have lots and lots of sites. In this case, we just happen to be using live gear, so we didn't stage up 10 different sets just for that sake. So so clearly when you come in, you can actually see the results. We kind of bubble up the worst result or the most severe issue, and then you can kind of click on that and wind your way through. At this point right now, we're not really having any issues, but if we were, I could click on Wi-Fi, for example. We can see in the past that that the AP just came up. That was last night because we were staging the system. So you've got a little bit of history as to what's going on, but it's really just, again, around the tier 1 tech, keep it really simple. If there are issues, there's usually a recommended action. So if things like, hey, we're seeing a lot of interference on Wi-Fi, we'll actually tell you we're seeing a lot of interference. You're on channel 1. We'd really recommend channel 11 based off of what we can see. And if you want to go there, there is a configuration button right at the bottom that will take you there. Matter of fact, why don't we just do that, because I want to show you the configuration next. Okay, so Uplevel has really been designed with two deployment models in mind. So one deployment model is I've got an Active Directory server. I need to log everybody who gets into the system. It's really what a lot of people are using with the more advanced customers. But there's another use model that we have in place, which is, I'm 8, 10, 12 people, and I've got a number of employees that are kind of one class, and then maybe I've got a receptionist and I've got a boss. And so people need different levels of access. But I don't need to track each and every individual user. Said another way, I don't want to pay for Active Directory to track each and every individual user. And to do that, behind the scenes, it's just VLANs and subnets, but we use this concept of groups. So you can see at the top, you can just see the internet port is connected and the Wi-Fi port is connected. So those are kind of taken out of the picture, but at least you know where they're connected. And as you go down, you can see the employees network. That's where all employees can connect. You can create a specialty network, which is, here's my sales network. And within each group, you actually can provision a Wi-Fi. You don't have to. You can provision Ethernet ports. You don't have to. And you can provision a share. And you can decide if you want to apply DNS filtering or not to each of these groups. So we have an employee group, which really everyone in the company can get at. So that's where you would put like office printers, that kind of thing, company calendar maybe in the employee share. Then you have a bunch of line of business groups, sales, marketing, manufacturing, and then they have their own special access, but they can also access anything in the employee group. And then you have the boss. So the boss wants access to everything. So they have their own private information, but then which is firewalled off from all the other groups, but then they can get access to each of the other groups. So we kind of have that tiered hierarchy if you don't have Active Directory in play. And then of course we have guest Wi-Fi, which is just VLAN off from everything. One of the things that's kind of nice about our system is that you don't need to worry about matching up VLANs with SSIDs and all that kind of stuff to maintain privacy. If you have 3 switches and 5 access points, you provision this stuff here, and then everything gets set up almost, SDN style. Everything gets set up all the way through to make sure it's all consistent and working correctly. So that's pretty much the fundamental thing that we do, and you can just create additional groups and have 5 line of business groups plus these special groups you see here. So we mentioned that within each group you can add Ethernet or Wi-Fi. I'll show you Wi-Fi really quick. It's meant to be simple. So if we wanted to add an additional Wi-Fi group, I know we already have one on the employee, but call it employee network. MSP webinars is the password. and can be accessed by employees. And then you turn that on, and now you've got, it uses WPA2 PSK clearly, so it's a pre-shared key right now. That'll be changing as we go forward. But as long as you have that SSID and that password, then you'll be able to connect into the employee network. So very simple to provision. You can go in, I'm not going to go through configuring all the access points, but you can control a handful of things in the access points, whether they support legacy devices, what the channel bandwidths are and that kind of thing, but really just a handful of settings. You can also remotely reboot access points. The other thing to note is the guest AP. The guest network, not AP. So the guest network is the only network where the password is optional. So if you just want people to be able to jump on, they can do that. And if you want a password so that they have to ask the receptionist or the restaurant or whatnot for a password, you can do that as well. We do not, at this point, I know the question's going to come, so I'll just preempt it. We do not have a splash page right now. That is a roadmap item. It's something we can do, but not something that we do at present. The reason I wanted to bring this up, though, is to show you that you can limit the amount of bandwidth on the guest network so that you don't have somebody sitting there watching Netflix and killing the employees. The last thing I'll say about Wi-Fi is that our Wi-Fi is controller-based. So the controller runs in the gateway. You don't pay for the controller or anything like that. It just happens to be a convenient place for it to run. And if you have 4, 5, 6 different access points, these SSIDs are advertised across all of the access points. You can roam between them. So if you're doing like voice over Wi-Fi, you can walk around the building and you'll get seamless handoffs between them and that kind of thing. So it works up to about 12 access points is kind of where we've kind of spec'd it out today for, targeting 25 users. That seems plenty. But if there's needs for more than that, there's really no sort of technical reason we couldn't build bigger than that. It just didn't make a lot of sense to do more. So I see a lot of questions coming in. Should I just keep going ahead?
Keep going through. I'll get to those when you're done.
Sounds good. Okay. So the Ethernet, I'm not going to go through except to say that the Ethernet, you can assign ports to individual groups. So it's VLAN by port. Your employees don't need to understand VLANs. So VLANs are all handled in the background. They're firewalled from each other and that kind of thing. But you basically just go in and say, hey, this goes into the employee group and this goes into the boss's group. So that's pretty straightforward. The other basic function is storage. So you have an option for no storage, obviously. You don't have to pay for it if you don't want it. But we also have 1 terabyte and 5 terabyte. The 5 terabyte is a recent add for things like architectural firms or engineering firms where they have a lot of imaging. And so you get this one physical piece of hardware, but what you can do with it is you can create a partition on it. So if we wanted a second employee drive, you can say, hey, we want a 50 gig, let's just call it sales just to keep it simple. This is where we're going to put all of our sales data. We're going to make it a 50 gig partition. It can be accessed by all employees. We're just creating a separate drive to do that. And we'll go ahead and save that. And so now we've taken and created a 50 gig partition. That was pretty much all there was to do that. And anyone in the employees group, if you can get access to the employee Wi-Fi or the employee Ethernet, then you can access the sales drive there.
And so, real quick, with that drive, what kind of RAID are you running on those drives?
So so Tom, I'm going to throw that to you just to break it up here a little.
No, we actually don't run RAID on those drives. If you consider a 5-person coffee shop, they're absolutely not willing to pay for any of that. What we do instead is allow you to do cloud disaster recovery or backup very cheaply and effectively. So that effectively forms your protection, as it were.
Right. So that's actually the perfect segue to this. So we have really 3 levels of redundancy, if you will. So we have local snapshots. That's really for the, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to delete that call that you guys are going to get. We use B-tree file systems. So you can control, with all of these, you can control the frequency of the backup. And So you can do it hourly, for example, and then you control the number of backups that you want to keep around. For those of you who aren't familiar with snapshots, snapshots are very lightweight images. So these go right onto the local drive, and they're quite small unless a whole horrible set of circumstances comes into play. But they allow you very, very quick recovery, individual file level, all that kind of thing. Beyond that, you've got the cloud backup. And the cloud backup, as I mentioned earlier, is in AWS, Amazon. And same kind of interface, but here you're gonna update less frequency. You're also probably not going to update at noon. You're probably going to do something like, hey, I want to do my backup at 3 a.m. And you'll specify the number of copies you want around. So maybe the obvious question is, well, why have both? Well, the cloud backup is really your disaster recovery in case the primary drive fails, and that's why we keep it off-site. It's also a cost adder. So when you deploy cloud backup, that'll actually cost above and beyond the base system. And then finally, we have archives. This is really like attorneys. Now, again, same interface. This is really meant for people who need to keep data around long-term. So attorneys need to keep data around for years. You don't want to pay for the more expensive cloud storage. It's out. It takes longer to get the data back, but it's out in AWS and cheaper storage. And it's the kind of thing, you call the paralegal, and the paralegal says, gee, or calls you, I should say, and says, gee, I need this back. And then you go and pull it back, and it takes, what, Tom, would you say in terms of time? What would be a reasonable expectation around time to get something out of archive?
Oh, depends on what you're getting out. Could be anywhere from minutes to a couple hours.
Okay. So we'll say hours to keep it simple.
Yeah.
So that's basically how it works. If you ever have a failure, as we talked about earlier, you can certainly recover the device locally if you have fast enough internet bandwidth. And you were doing cloud backup. If you don't, then we can ship you a box as well. We'll recover the data onto the drive and then ship it to you. So you have that option as well. Okay, so now getting into the good stuff here. I call it the good stuff because it's the stuff that people really like our system for. One is the VPN. So you'll recall here that we're looking at Robin's house would be an employee, and Plano, for those of you who aren't familiar with Dallas, that's the Dallas, Texas area. So we have two systems. We have somebody who works from home, and we have somebody, the home office in Plano. So if we want to connect those two sites together, we can come over here and put this into the site-to-site VPN. And what we can decide to do is we want the employees and the boss to be able to work seamlessly between those two sites. We simply check those two buttons, and now those two sites are connected together. You don't need to do any fancy configuration or anything. And this is really because both of these sites tunnel back to our management server that's out in the cloud. And so by just checking this box, we're able to tie those tunnels together and make it really seamless to roll out. So this is something, again, that goes over really well with multi-site deployments.
And obviously, this is one of those scenarios where it's not designed for people that are trying to have some kind of complex VPN. This is, if you want all of the sites to see each other, just turn the VPNs on, and they'll see each other, right? Like there's not a let VoIP see the employees and the boss see the employees, but don't let VoIP see the boss.
Correct.
All or nothing.
Correct. So you can turn it on group by group. So you can make it so, it's unfortunate I didn't have a third group here, but you can make it so the employees can see each other, but the boss can't. I don't know why you would ever want to do that, but if you had a sales group here, you can make it so the sales group could see each other, but the employees couldn't. Or maybe the guy hasn't paid you, so you're just trying to get him to pay his bill by shutting off his VPN access. I don't know. But you can control it on a group by group basis, but you're correct. And actually, that's one of the things we'll get into in the positioning. One of the more common requests we get from folks that is something we're figuring out, but it's something that won't be figured out, within the next 3 months, is we want to be able to use Cisco or Juniper or something like that at the home office, and this would be a great remote office, kind of device. And can you VPN those devices back? Can you VPN essentially an Uplevel device into a Cisco router? And the answer today is no, but we're obviously aware of that need, and so that is something that we'll be working on. But that one always comes up, so again, I'll just preempt that question before we get there. So clearly that's site-to-site VPN. The other kind of VPN we have, of course, is remote access. So let's say Steve wanted to work from home. You just type in his name, you create a password or generate a password. Steve is the boss, of course, so we'll put him into the boss group. And that's pretty much it. Steve is now provisioned for VPN in the system. So
Do I need
we use
software to do that, or is that just a standard built-in VPN with Windows?
You are a perfect straight man, my friend. You just use the standard software in Windows or Mac, and we have configuration guides that show you how to set that up. But it takes a little longer than what I just showed you. It might take a minute to set that up, but that's pretty much it. So that closes obviously one of the biggest issues that you're going to see at small businesses in the U.S. right now, which is the why can't I think of the name of it? The remote access to the server function, the remote desktop function being open and unprotected. We see a lot of that as people are trying to move offsite.
Mm-hmm.
So that there would be our remote access VPN. So we've gone through all this stuff. Let me jump down to the firewall now. So the firewall, we give you some basic statistics. These statistics are going to look wonky. I'm telling you that right now because we're running this on an internal network. This is actually sitting behind one of our own, sitting in one of our production networks. So you'll actually see a bunch of these weird TCP port numbers that really aren't a threat at all. Normally, when people deploy our devices, obviously they just put the terminating device, the cable modem or the DSL modem, into pass-through mode. And so you actually see the kind of data I showed you in the presentation. But you can see the kind of traffic, you can see how much it's coming through, you can see where the attacks are coming from, what kind of attacks are coming in. You'll be able to block in the next release, which is due next month. You'll be able to block on traffic coming from foreign countries, which is a pretty reasonable thing to do in most cases. And then you can also see the domain filtering stats. So we haven't been using this network, so there are no domain filtering stats right now. We kind of put it up for this demo. So unfortunately, I don't have stats to show you guys, but you can see everything. You can get a nice high-level view here. Obviously, we do basic port blocking, just TCP port, UDP port. We do the NAT when it comes in, all that good stuff if you need it. You can create firewall rules, so you can have your senior tech say, hey, here's a set of rules that we like. Save them off in the library, and then you can pull them down and add them in here. I'm not going to show it to you because it's kind of boring, but we do have it available. It's very handy. A lot of times what we'll have is people using domain filtering along with port blocking. So again, you can use Cisco Umbrella with this solution. You can use WebTitan, WebRoot, or you can use the Uplevel domain filtering. As I mentioned, we use WebTitan behind the scenes, so it's a real DNS filtering solution. You actually have the licenses to install on the devices. So if you are protecting devices that are, say, laptops, you can actually, through purchasing through us, you can actually go ahead and install on the laptops, on the mobile devices if you want. But in any case, we implement it in the gateway as well. So anyone who's on site can run through this. So you can block by different categories. Again, very simple to set up. You just come in here and pick which categories it is that you want blocked. You can blacklist specific domains or whitelist specific domains. There's a few keys for override. One thing that is kind of cool, and we've talked about this a little bit, is you can decide, like the boss, of course, never ever wants to be filtered, even though they're usually the worst offender in the company. But you can go group by group and decide which groups are being filtered. Typically, you don't want voice filtered, for example. So you can decide who gets filtered and who gets open internet access. We currently only have one filtered definition, and you can either apply it or not apply it to a particular group. You can't have one set of policies for employees and a second set of policies for guests, for example. So that is the domain filtering.
So we've got a ton of questions here.
Okay. I don't know if that means I'm doing well or I'm doing poorly, but go ahead and fire away.
No, I think you're doing well. They're engaging questions. So, all right. So we'll start off easy. Cloud backups. Are they capable of doing any industry compliance stuff, like regulatory compliance type stuff, meeting those compliance regulations on the backups?
So you're talking, okay, go ahead, Tom.
Yes, I can take that. So the cloud backups are fully encrypted with AES-256 encryption. We don't at this point support HIPAA compliance in the cloud backups, but we will be in about 3 months. The issue is not so much the security of the backups as the fact that we need to track and audit the access to those. And when we do that, they will be HIPAA compliant.
Nice. Now, you keep mentioning file server. How's the file server work? How do we access it? Is it, it's not like a Windows server in there, is it?
It's not a Windows server in there. To be in the spirit of full disclosure, it's actually a Samba Force server. However, we have put in a vast amount of management on top of that, as well as fix some bugs and issues. So it's a standard SMB 123 protocol that it runs to any Windows device, and we have also had people mount it on Macs. So apart from that, it acts like a standard NAS. It is not integrated right now with AD and Azure, but we just watch this space 3 months from now and we'll have a different story.
So no Active Directory from Microsoft, no Azure. That may change in the next 3 to 6 months is what I'm hearing.
That is correct.
So how do people authenticate?
Let me weigh in real quick on that. You can use this system with Active Directory. We have not integrated Active Directory into our solution. So we do have a number of people who use this solution, as their network infrastructure along with an AD server. But typically in that case, then they won't use our files, our NAS or our file server. They'll typically put that on the AD.
I wouldn't expect, the VPN or the Wi-Fi to be AD connected. I was more asking about the file server part.
Correct.
Okay, so how do people authenticate to this file server?
Right now, it's access-based authentication. So if you have access to the Ethernet port or to the Wi-Fi SSID, you have access to the share that is associated with that Ethernet port or Wi-Fi SSID. So if you know the password to the SSID, yes, you get access to the share. We find that this level of security and authentication is actually way better than what we see in the network we go into today, where there is none at all.
And so we have like zero auditing insight as to, did Tim delete the file or did Bob delete the file? If they're both on the same Wi-Fi, then we have no idea, right?
Yes, that is correct, without a doubt. And that for environments that require that, for example, a small doctor's office, they would require that to be HIPAA compliant. For environments that require that today, I mean, we would encourage you to use a standard AD server. When we have our own AD in a few months, then that will change. But today, no, we encourage you to use our own AD server as a file server.
Okay. So it sounds like you guys are making it pretty clear that you understand that there are use cases where your product makes sense and there are use cases where your product doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. And we guide our partners to differentiate between those two.
Now, I know that you specified earlier, Glenn, that you have kind of focused on the fewer than 25 employee market. So I am not sure if there are a limit to how many concurrent VPN connections, user VPN connections. What is that limit? Otherwise, I would assume that the hardware is capable of 25 or fewer, since that's what you again are advertising and marketing this device to.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Quick clarification. So there's really nothing in our product that hard limits at 25, if you remember the picture we had earlier. So clearly people can use more than that. That's really more of a marketing guidance point. We didn't want a bunch of people bringing this to a 75-person company and then saying, gee, it's way outsized. So that's the first thing to understand. Regarding VPN specifically, there is really no hard limit. We say up to 50 concurrent users, just so we don't get somebody who's trying to use this at a Fortune 500 company and say, gee, it doesn't work for 500 users. But yeah, there's really no significant limit in its intended use case at all.
And if one of those if the only hard drive that's inside this thing crashes, what services besides file server stop working? I mean, is this the old TV, VCR, DVD player combo where, you know, the DVD player stopped working, so now I can't watch TV anymore?
No, that's not right. Actually, the hard drive that is used to use the data is completely separate from the flash storage that is used by the device itself. So the hard drive can go south and the device will continue to work as a perfectly usable firewall and Wi-Fi controller and everything else.
Okay, so firewall, Wi-Fi, VPN, voice over IP, DNS, all of that stuff would stay functional. We would only lose access to the storage section.
That is correct.
Okay.
Similar story on internet too. That question comes up a lot. If you lose internet access, the LAN still functions. I mean, most people expect that, but just to be explicit.
Right. So if the internet goes down, we still have access to our storage drives.
You do.
Perfect. Now, is there a way for us to do like a local backup? You know, does this thing have like a USB port on it? We can back it up to an external drive?
It does have a USB port, but it's not enabled at the moment. What people do instead is they plug in their NAS to the one of the Ethernet ports, and they simply set up a job to copy over the contents to the external NAS. You can buy a cheap NAS for the service for very little.
Well, that's a good segue. So if we can buy a cheap NAS, you know, why not buy, you know, a Ubiquiti USG Pro 4, enable smart queues, use DNS filter or Cisco umbrella. That way now we own everything and we can still sell it as a hardware as a service to our end users.
Totally. That's a great question. Comes up a lot. Actually, for example, I've been a Ubiquiti fan for years and years. I have used Ubiquiti stuff at my own house and elsewhere. I mean, you can do all that. This is, it is perfectly reasonable for any smart, highly technically competent person to take all this stuff, pull them off the shelf, Best Buy, Amazon, so on, put it all together, make it all work, try and put a dashboard in front of it and do all that stuff. But the real question is, why would you? I mean, if you're going to talk about a 5 or 10 person restaurant and they're going to pay you $200 a month, is it really worth devoting your technical resources to doing that? Basically, we've done it, right?
Well, okay, but if we're using Ubiquiti, we've likely already got our own cloud-hosted controller. So I think the answer to the question, why would we, is to make more money. You know, if we don't have to give you the, you know, 50, 70, 200, whatever dollars a month, and we just have to buy some Ubiquiti gear for a few $100 up front, you know, now we're going to be much more profitable. You know, yes, we have more outlay up front, but, you know, in 6-7 months, we're already making a lot more money each month over what we would be making paying you for hardware as a service.
Yes,
That's just my opinion.
That's a valid question to ask. So, for example, to match that collection of things that you see listed on the left of that screen there, it would not take just one Ubiquiti box, but again, speaking from personal experience, you'd need the Ubiquiti, the USG Pro, and you need their access points. You'd need to some kind of a storage device. You would then go through and start configuring all these, and all these have to be configured separately for each customer. And then if your Ubiquiti box goes out, then you are going to plug in a new one, go through the whole process again. Whereas with us, you plug in our box and it essentially auto configures itself from scratch without you having to raise a finger. So
since you use Ubiquiti gear at home, so you know that that's not entirely accurate. You said if that dies, we have to get another one and do it all over again. But if it dies, we literally adopt a new one, and it reconfigures itself.
The firewall does, yes.
And so does the access points.
So, for example, I have a storage box at home. I would need to.
Well, Ubiquiti doesn't sell storage boxes, though. I was simply responding to your statement about Ubiquiti.
Okay. No, that's a fair statement. You can do all this stuff with a Ubiquiti box. But our partners find that they can turn this over to a relatively new tech and say, here, go take care of the customer. And he probably doesn't have the chops to do what I did with my Ubiquiti box. But he can just click a few buttons over here and take care of the customer without even bothering the partner.
So what scares me about that, and I'm playing devil's advocate here with you, Tom. What scares me about that is I feel like you are enabling people who don't know what they're doing to go out and start an MSP and sell services to companies that don't know that their new IT provider doesn't know what they're doing. And they're going to get themselves in way over their head just because now you've got people that think to themselves, well, I don't know how to use Ubiquiti or Sophos or insert here. It doesn't matter. But I found this device that now it'll do everything for me. And it's so easy, an idiot can set it up. So now I can just go start doing IT services and
that's an interesting point. So we stay very clear of those people because we find they get themselves sucked into far more trouble than they ever can shake a stick at. What we typically...
But how do you know if that's who you're getting involved with? I mean, it's not like you're sitting down and having hours and hours of conversation before you let an MSP buy your product.
We have an onboarding process, and they need to go through the onboarding process before we even ship them any gear. And part of the onboarding process is an extended training as well as a demo. And we can usually judge by the end of the process whether they're serious. A lot of them actually self-select themselves out of it when they realize that, I really need to know something about networking before I go install this. Doesn't have to be as much as a CCNA, but it has to be pretty decent.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to easier questions for you guys. SNMP. Does your gear support SNMP or have SSH access for the guys that want the more advanced stuff?
No, it doesn't support SNMP or have direct SSH access into it. No.
Okay. And how long has this been like a fully baked product available to the masses as opposed to something that's been in some type of beta or limited release state?
We've been selling to the general market since the beginning of last year. So I guess that's close on 2 years now. And it's been in development since 2015. So I guess that would be more than 3.5 years now.
Okay. And so there's no server, there's no Active Directory. It almost sounds like there's no OS for us to be able to do anything with. Is this able to host QuickBooks multi-user files, or does that still require Windows application to do that?
As a QuickBooks server in the classical sense, to host multi-user files, you still need a Windows server to do that.
And Ed, the reason for that is QuickBooks has that whole database server application where even when the thing's installed and working correctly, it's never working correctly. So yeah, you can't just pop a QuickBooks file on here and expect it to be hosted.
Yes,
Similarly, this isn't going to do any type of application hosting or database hosting or anything like that. It is simply a remote file server.
Yes, I mean you can think of it as a NAS.
Right.
Yeah, you can blame the marketing guy. You can blame the marketing guy here because the marketing guy said, "Oh, I want to drive home that people can replace servers in a lot of cases, but it is more NAS than it is a file server where you would actually run code." So I actually intended to change my language there during the presentation and forgot as I was going through. But yes, it's more like a NAS and less of a file server where you would run your own code.
Now, are you channel only, or can anyone go pick up one of your products?
We are channel only. We actually don't think we'd be doing anyone a service by trying to sell this directly. We don't think that's in the end customer's best interest. We do not advertise our pricing. I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. We don't put our pricing out there. And the big reason is we don't want you guys to have somebody picking apart your quote saying, but I could buy this for, X and you're charging me Y. And we don't think that helps you guys at all. So we're 100% channel. And we think that really is the right thing to do for the end customer, not just for us or for you.
And using the portal, the partner portal, am I able to pre-configure a new device that's never been powered on? Like, can I have it ready to go for all I have to do is pop into my client's office, plug it in, turn it on, and it starts provisioning itself?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's one of our favorite use cases. We have a lot of people with these multi-site offices that will configure them while the systems are being shipped to the customer site. About the only thing you can't do remotely is to set a static IP address in the device. We just feel like that's a pretty good way to cause a lot of headaches for everyone.
A static internet address or a static local?
Correct.
Okay. And I almost said WAN or LAN, but for people that are only half listening, they sound identical. So, all right.
Static internet.
So
you can do it, by the way. You can do it. You just can't do it when you're not next to the gear. In case you mess something up, you don't orphan the gear 2 hours of drive away.
That's frustrating, though, because what if I'm shipping it to an office, they have a static IP, and I'm 2 hours away?
You usually configure the static IP before you ship it to the office. We actually had one who shipped it to an office in a different state. They pre-configured it, shipped it, the office manager plugged it in, it powered up, and it worked.
Okay. Maybe I'm misunderstanding then. PPPoE, you able to support that for the internet connection?
No, we don't. We had this request from, surprisingly, an MSP in Alaska.
That would make sense, actually, in Alaska.
There's a lot of PPPoE there.
All right. So how well are you guys funded? Are you a completely private company? Do you have any outside investment?
We are a completely private company. We are very well funded. We have both outside investment as well as the founders sinking money into it. And there is no chance of us going out of business anytime in the next 2 or 3 years, at least.
No,
we have
it's a little scary when you say sinking money into it.
Sinking, well, I guess I use that loosely. It's not like we dug a big pit and threw the money in. We expect to get our money back out of this in spades.
That's always a good thing, right?
How about putting money into it? That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah,
Here's
Steve,
a good-
if I could just if
Yeah.
I could just add to that, because I think it's a very fair question. The only other thing I would add is we're growing like 15% every month on month. So we're seeing pretty high adoption rates and growth. Otherwise, otherwise I probably wouldn't feel so good about putting my money into it, obviously. But
Sure.
But yeah, it's our take rates are pretty good right now.
So, if I recall correctly, you guys have a controller somewhere else that all of our devices connect to your thing. And that's like how the VPNs would all work and all that stuff. So are you collecting any analytical data about anything from our devices?
Glenn, do you want me to take that?
Why don't you take it? I'm going to pull up the report while you're talking.
Excellent. We have to be very careful in terms of what kind of data we collect. HIPAA, for example, has strict requirements for what you can do and we can't. So we do collect analytics that definitely talk about the health of the device, the health of the overall network, all that kind of stuff. So we, for example, know when ISPs go up and down. We know when ADs are coming online, going offline, that sort of stuff. We keep track of the number of clients connected and so on and so forth. So we do collect a variety of analytics. The firewall in particular is something where we collect a number of things on over time. Does that answer the question?
So you're not collecting any of that data that we would be offended you collecting, like names, addresses, personally identifying information.
Oh my gosh, no, we don't collect any of that stuff. We would be in so much trouble if we did that.
Well, you would think Facebook and Microsoft would be in so much trouble for doing that too, but they aren't, and they do. So, I feel like we got to ask these days.
Agreed. Yes, and no, it's basically to a certain extent, it's our MSPs that would get in trouble if we started collecting that information because they have to sign HIPAA Business Associate Agreement, and they can't sign that if we start collecting patient health information.
And to clarify, your cloud backup at this time is not compliant with HIPAA. However, everything else that the device does is compliant with HIPAA.
That is correct. We will actually sign business associate agreements with our MSPs for covering everything except the basically you can sum it up, everything except the storage. The storage needs auditing of access. It's fully encrypted, but it needs to have access audited.
Okay, so not even just the cloud backups, the whole storage component, because there's no audit. That's not
Correct. Correct. That audit is coming, but it's not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, and Tom's gonna hate me for saying this, but I'm gonna say it anyways. We're actually pending. It's the next release that's coming here in the next 2 or 3 weeks, so it's effectively today. But that's actually the release that's compatible. We'll sign a BAA today, but we are waiting for one small feature in the next release that needs to go through. So I would say we're compatible 3 weeks from now.
Good to know. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. This is a really interesting device. I would say that it's not for everyone. If you are the type of MSP that wants to standardize your networking stack, you want everyone to be on Ubiquity or everyone to be on Sophos, that maybe this isn't for you because then you would be having multiple devices out there. But if you're looking for something that is going to be a little more tailored to the very small companies that are fewer than 25 employees, this is something to consider, to check out. Glenn, if you could be so kind to send me some kind of pricing sheet that also lists what that 36-month subscription price is, so that way we can list what those prices are for the member discount, I would greatly appreciate that. And I'll put that in a member area for you guys. Is there anything else that you think people should know, Glenn, Tom?
Just a couple of quick things. We do generate reports along the analytics question. You can get a PDF or a Google Doc, so you guys can go in and type, and it's really meant for the business review. And the last thing I'll add, you can still see my screen, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Okay, so when anyone becomes a partner, one of the things we do is we generate a bunch of vertical market solution collateral. So again, for a lot of guys starting out, it can be difficult to create stuff that you can use. So we'll provide branded collateral like this for all of our partners. It's with your color, it's your logo, it's really kind of meant to feature that. And we're working a lot on lead gen programs now, where we have pretty low cost access to. We basically built our own search engine. So we searched the next town over. We found about 700 dentists, and so we'll provide the material to reach out to those folks. In other words, the letters and that kind of thing, along with the collateral to use to support that. So we're very much in the mindset of trying to help our MSPs drive new business. So we support on that side as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for attending, guys. This was fun. And if anyone here has any other questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, steve@mspwebinars.com. Glenn, where can they reach out to you guys if they have any other questions?
Well, you can always just go to our website, uplevelsystems.com, and put in a request there. That'll come to me as well as the rest of the customer-facing team, or you can just pop an email into info@uplevelsystems.com, and that'll work the same way.
Perfect.
And both Glenn and I actually see those emails, so they come straight to us.
Yeah.
Excellent. Hey, thanks so much for being here, guys. Thanks for everyone that was able to attend this live. And for those of you that are watching this pre-recorded, I do hope everyone has a great day, and I'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.